I think on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say the current US-Japan relations are something like 25. So it's way out of off the charts, and the relationship is very good. The relationship has been good since the days of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe and President Donald Trump. But that relationship was very much dependent on Abe's personal relationship with Trump. I think the Biden administration has changed the dynamics of the relationship in a very positive way, in that it's more based on values and this shared view of the world and a liberal international order. So it's much more easier for Japan to get on board. The other side of that is that China has really stopped bothering to be loved by the world. So when it comes to Xinjiang, Hong Kong, Taiwan, it really doesn't care what the world thinks. So that has made it much more easier for Japan to stick with Washington. But in the mid to long term, whether this honeymoon between the US and Japan will last forever, and whether Japan's strategy is correct in just teaming with America, I'm not quite sure. I think Japan thinks that we're not heading into a bipolar world, but we're heading into a world where the US-led international liberal order will be much more bigger and more powerful than China's pillar. So whether that's true, I can't say, but I think it's important for Japan and South Korea to keep their options open and to be flexible, because we really don't know which way the world is going. Japan is the world's third largest economy. It has a very powerful, especially maritime self-defense force. So you could say that it's a major country. But if you really think of the great power competition and the players taking part in that great power competition, I think they have to have a huge population, huge economy, huge military, and global ambitions. Japan doesn't really fit those. It doesn't have the population, it doesn't have the global ambitions. So we'll leave that to the US and China. So that probably makes Japan a middle power. And if you look at what's happening in the Indo-Pacific, while there is a great power competition and all these India, Australia, Japan are siding with America, underneath the surface, there is a movement of these middle powers joining hands. And what's interesting is that they're joining hands first to form a united front against China, but also I think they're preparing for the day when the next American president isn't as committed to the Indo-Pacific and isn't as caring of its allies and partners, so that if such a new American president does come into office, these middle powers would have a stable footing. Japan's economy is very much intertwined with China. We have so many manufacturers and recently so much more retail operators doing business in China. And the reality is that China is the source of growth for so many Japanese companies. So it's very difficult to decouple with China completely. Japan would like to have a good security relationship with America, but also have a good economic relationship with China. That looks to be very difficult to sustain going forward. I say that because if you look at the Pentagon and the things that they are worried about, I think they're worried about the Chinese chips embedded into the system in American infrastructure could be planted with malware. Now, if that's the case, then the sanctions on Huawei, for instance, are not going to go away. And America will try to build a separate, decoupled supply chain of high-tech technology. And it would request that Japan and South Korea and all its allies move to the American version of the supply chain. Now, that's going to be really difficult for Japanese companies like Tokyo Electron and all these companies, Murata, that make a bulk of their profit in China. So whether Japan decouples in the high-tech world from China is going to be a very difficult choice for Japan to make. And for Japan, if China does take over Taiwan militarily, if that happens on Wednesday, I think Japan thinks that it will come after the Senkaku Islands on Thursday and possibly come for the Okinawa Islands on Friday. So that's why the Taiwan issue is a Japanese defense issue. But when it comes to Suga's position on Taiwan, I think it's a little different from Biden's. In March, Japan and the US held a 2+2 meeting of defense and foreign ministers. In that statement, they underscored the importance of the peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. And in April, when Biden and Suga met at the White House, they added one more sentence to that. They underscored the importance of peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait and encourages the peaceful resolution of cross-strait issues. So that on the surface, at first glance, it looks like they added more on Taiwan. So maybe Japan and the US toughened their stance on Taiwan. It was indeed the first time since 1969 that the US and Japanese leaders mentioned Taiwan in their joint statement. But if you look at the words that were added, it's encouraging the peaceful resolution of cross-strait issues. And I heard that Suga wanted to add this to signal that the first priority is a peaceful resolution. So I think there may be a little bit of a difference between Suga and the Pentagon on this issue. History is a very interesting aspect of the relationship. Of course, the immediate history is a very sad history, and it really tears up the relationship between the two countries. But if you go back a few centuries to the Tang Dynasty and the Nara period of Japan, relations are very good. Japan sent 20 dignitaries to the Tang Dynasty to learn about the culture and the science. Chang'an back then was the New York of today, and Japan learned so much. So I think the relationship between Japan and China was that of admiration and learning from the best. If China does become the world's dominant superpower in 2028 or 2030, and it can become like the Tang Dynasty, I think Japan will tilt towards China. But if the superpower China is an extension of what the China is today, then that's not going to happen. History tells us that Japan has not hesitated to change its alliances. In the early 20th century, Japan had an alliance with England, then it switched 180 degrees to team with Nazi Germany after the war. It tilted 180 degrees back to the US and freedom and democracy. So it has a track record that suggests that if China becomes the dominant superpower, it will have no hesitation to switch to China, but we'll see. Nikkei Asia is the English language arm of Nikkei. Nikkei is a Japanese newspaper in operation for 145 years. We want to be the go-to place for everything regarding the Indo-Pacific business, economy, and the geopolitics that influence those business decisions. We're at asia.nikkei.com. You can subscribe to us the first 3 months for 2 cups of coffee, so please give it a try.